Kia ora whānau, how are we all? Welcome to Far North Ahipara. This is Matt's Barbecue. I'm Kai Māori's butcher. I get around the place. I sponsor a few things. So I'd just like to shout out Auntie Jam and Hemi. Hope you fellas are having a good day. And to the rest of you, welcome. I just thought I'd do a quick line about smoking meat.
What's this in the tree?
I'm a very passionate smoker. I smoke quite a lot of stuff. Salamis, hams, bacon, the whole lot. But right now I'm smoking up a nice pork leg for the whānau, and we're going to have what we call pulled pork sliders. Right. Quickly.
Why? What are you doing?
What we're doing at the moment is using charcoal, wood to smoke, and we're adding a little bit of pahutakawa as the smoke flavour. The reason why we don't just use pahutakawa is that using lumpwood charcoal, such as the stuff up here, helps us to keep the temperature at a reasonable level.
And it's $39.
There's a lot of people out there who will give you advice about which temperatures to smoke at, and you can smoke at really hot or really cold. Using the lumpwood charcoal like this allows you to control the heat. The worst thing that you want to have is really hot and really cold, and the heat to go all over the place. So, what we have over here is a fire pit. This is where we get our charcoal ready to smoke. The way we do that is we put this little grill up here on top. You put your lump charcoal, which I'll show you in a sec. You put it up there, you get the charcoal started, and then you transfer it over the smoker. You come over here. This is the weapon of choice I've chosen today. It's custom built smokehouse. It's full stainless steel. It's quite nice. However, you can do this in any particular way or shape. It doesn't have to be quite like this, any size or whatever. It doesn't matter. The main thing you want to do is have an opportunity to present the charcoals like this. This meat's been on for about 3 hours, and we'll get into the rubs and all that sort of stuff a bit later on, but that's pretty basic. It can be any size or shape. You just want to have a little opportunity for the smoke to pass out, otherwise it's all in and it's too much smoke. But yeah, pretty simple. Right, so we've smoked that meat for about 3 hours. We haven't done any rubs to it. I'm a firm believer that New Zealand has some of the best meat available, particularly pork, beef and lamb. For those of you who like flavours, by all means add your favourite rub before you start smoking it. I, however, just like simple pork with simple smoke, so that's why it's like that. Come over here to the table. Just got a really simple recipe that I have for pulled pork. We've put on that leg of pork there, we've got the smoke into it for 3 hours, so it's got what it has the smoke flavour. Now what we're about to do is pull that leg of pork out of the smoker, put it into here. We're going to add our ingredients, really simple, and we're going to put it back in there, and we'll talk about the techniques and why we're doing this particular technique. So, let's crack into it. Really handy. So this pork here is half a pork leg. For those of you more astute into the butchery trade, it's off the butt end of the leg, so that's the rump. We've left the bone in it. You can go boneless, and yes, it's easier, but doing this particular application called pulled pork, we want to get the heat into the bone, and the bone will actually cook the meat really, really nicely. So all you have to do, no measurements, pretty simple, man. A little bit of apple cider, probably 2 or 3. Probably the most important ingredient in any type of cooking is maple syrup. You need to use pure Canadian maple syrup. If you use if you don't use pure Canadian syrup, you'll get a flavoured syrup which is full of sugar and it will burn. This is Canadian maple syrup. There's no other ingredients other than that. It's easy to find at the supermarket. It's my favourite ingredient on any type of smoking application. Thirdly, Jack Daniels. Yes, you call it a waste, but goddamn it tastes good. I like to do a few sips as I'm doing it. Just maybe a shot. And another one, pink salt, a little bit of salt. Give it a whisk. Now you can add any sort of flavour you want to your pulled pork, whether you're more of a sweet person or a savoury person. I just find that this is really nice. All I'm going to do is just pour a little bit over there, just like this. Right, we'll always leave a little bit more for later and I'll explain that as we go. Right, so this is a half a leg off what they call a trim pig. A trim pig means it's over 50 kilos, between 50 and 75 kilos. I like to use a bigger slice of pork. You can use smaller, however, one, you're going to have heaps of leftovers, and two, I find that the trim pig, when it reaches over 50 kilos, is the best meat to use for this particular application. If I was frying it or doing a stir fry, I'd use a slightly smaller pig, but if you go down to your local butcher and ask them for a leg off a trim pig, most of them will know what you're talking about. One of the other things I'm really particular about is I only use New Zealand meat when I like to smoke. The first reason for that is I believe that New Zealand meat is the best meat around. We live in a beautiful country. Most pig farmers in New Zealand are second and third generations and they know how to look after their pigs. Secondly, the imported stuff is always going to be pre-frozen, which takes away from the quality a little bit. But pork's a really cheap New Zealand meat. For you hunters out there, just because you land a massive boar, a couple of £100 or whatever, sometimes it's not the best for this type of thing. The smaller fellas are all good, and yeah, if any of you have any questions, I'd suggest you talk to your local butcher. There's always a local butcher around. They know a lot about their stuff and they'll tell you which meat's better. Anyway, so that's a really easy, simple application. This particular technique in this here is called a boat. So what we're doing is we're going to now, once we've smoked the meat, so we've got the smoke into the pork, we're going to put this boat inside the smoker, and when it cooks, when the heat now transfers into this, it's going to leave all the juices slopping around, and that's why it's called a boat technique. After a couple more hours on the smoker, I'm going to put a tin foil lid on it, and then that's called a wrapped boat. Doing things like ribs and that, you wouldn't particularly do this technique, but with pulled pork, what you want to do once you've got the smoke flavour in it is keep the moisture in there. If I was to leave this cooking like this, it might be nice slice, but I'm after pulled pork, which at the end of the cooking process I'll show you why it's important. Alright, so I've done that, really easy. Go back into the smoker. Sit in there like that, shut the door, and I've done that. Now, let's talk into go into techniques, the reason why we do certain techniques. One of the most talked about things in the barbecue scene is temperature. What temperature do you cook at? Do you use Celsius or Fahrenheit? What it means, why you use it, and how to check the temperature. For the more professional barbecues out there, they'll say that they cook between 225 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason why I like to use Fahrenheit is with Celsius, it's a smaller sample size of the temperature. Fahrenheit gives you more, it's easier to understand which temperature does what. You'll notice on this particular smoke I don't have any temperature gauges. The reason for that is I like to let the smoker do its thing. If somebody tells you that you need to have it at 250 degrees, you might have a smoker that only it doesn't sit happy at 250 degrees. You're constantly adding charcoal, you're constantly taking away. I don't know what that particular smoker is sitting at. I'm only just going off experience and reading the meat as I smoke it, and the only way you get that is by doing it. What I do like to look at when I look at the smoker is it happy? If you notice, it's pretty hard to tell, and the only way that you get this is by time on your smoker. It's just chugging away. The smoke's not pouring out, but there is some smoke coming out. The only way that you get that is by using your particular smoker, and don't be worried about stuffing it up. If you do find it's too hot and you burn it, just slow it down, cut the burnt bits off. Smoking's all about experience. I've done heaps of it. I'm not that experienced, and the only way that you get experience is by trying it. Some of the other smokers which are really easy to use are the Weber kettles and the Charmates, and some of them have a temperature gauge on there. Just got to remember that just because somebody tells you should smoke at a certain temperature, the temperature gauge that's sitting on the lid is not necessarily the temperature at the way that you're smoking. So just when you chuck it in, don't chuck a heap of charcoal on there, just put in enough, and we'll go over again and I'll show you what I think is enough for this particular smoker. So I've just made a little pile over here. It's not out of control. You'll notice all the white parts are charcoal, and these two little sticks here are Pahudakawa. With the Pahudakawa, I'm using that as a flavour. If you're lucky enough to have heaps of Pahudakawa sitting around, you can actually make your own charcoal. It's quite a process. And look, I'll go back to again, the reason why I use charcoal is because that sits nicely now. If I had a wood fire in there, the temperature is going to be going up and down all the time, and it will affect the quality of what I'm trying to do. Just those two sticks of Pahudakawa is more than enough to flavour your particular smoking meat that you're smoking. Right, so we've done the sauce, we've put it in there. We're going to leave it there for about an hour, hour and a half, just to try and get some more smoke into the glaze that I've put on it. That's what I'd call that. Now, the second most important thing about temperature. Once you've worked out which temperature your pit runs at, you might be really fussy about which temperature you run at, and you can hold your pit at whatever temperature you want. That's fine, that's great. The second most important thing, which is more important than your cooking temperature, is the temperature that you get the meat up to. One of the most important things to understand about smoking meat is it's different than frying and grilling and stewing, and that the temperature of that particular piece of meat is not guaranteed to be 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours or 10 hours or 2 hours. Every single bit of meat, when you smoke it in this application, will have a different rate of climb to where it gets to a certain point to where you think it's cooked. It goes through what they call a stall process, so it will go up and up and up, and it will stop and level out. Lots of people will take the meat off then and say it's cooked, but I can guarantee you if you're using the right temperature to cook it with, you need to take the piece of meat up to 202 or 3 degrees Fahrenheit for this particular application. It's different than other meats. 203 degrees Fahrenheit in this leg of pork will mean that the meat inside is cooked, and the fat that runs through all the muscles, otherwise known as marbling, does what they call render. And as it climbs up to that temperature, the fat inside that meat will render down, and that's when you get the beautiful, luscious pulled pork, which is what I'm after. Further on down the track, I might do another video about brisket. There's beef short ribs, there's pork ribs, chicken. All of those meats have their own separate application on which temperature to take it to and why it's important. This particular meat, 203 degrees Fahrenheit. If you like me, go on Google and work out what Celsius is. So what I have here, probably the most important part about smoking meat is getting it to the right temperature. This probe here costs $15. Go down to the supermarket. It's easy. This one's in Celsius, so like I said, Google what Celsius 203 degrees Fahrenheit is, and as we get further on down the process, I'll stab that into the meat and get an internal reading. Important to understand that the meat inside will be a different temperature than the meat outside, so sometimes you need to probe 3 or 4 different spots to make sure you reach the right temperature. The other really easy way, if you don't have one of these, grab a toothpick or a kebab skewer. As you're coming up to what you think is the end of your smoking process, stab it in the meat. If it flies in there like butter, it's cooked. So I hope that helps a few people out. I'm involved in a few places around. I've got a shop, Seasons Market in Papakura in South Auckland. Also have Matt's Meat Market and Kaidoia Markets every Saturday, and also do a bit of stuff with whānau meats in Kaidoia. For any of you butchers or hunters or hunter-gatherers out there who have more questions, please find me on Matt's Meat Market, find me at Whānau Meats, talk about it to any of you butchers who might have more to add, because I'm only relatively new in the game. Let's all just start talking about it and promote a beautiful method of cooking, which is smoking pork. And I'll be back online to show you what it looks like at the end, and we'll sit down and have a kite. Happy days, fellas. Take it easy. Peace.